August 22, 1987, 11:47 p.m., Abbey Road Studios, Studio 2, London, England. 29-year-old Prince Rogers Nelson was completing overdubs for his Sign O' the Times album when 42-year-old Eric Clapton walked into the control room, took one look at the massive mixing console covered in Prince's handwritten notes and technical diagrams, and let out a dismissive laugh that echoed through the legendary studio where the Beatles had created their masterpieces. "This is exactly what's wrong with modern music," Clapton announced to the room full of seasoned audio engineers and producers who had worked with everyone from Pink Floyd to Led Zeppelin. "All these fancy studio tricks, electronic gimmicks, and overproduced nonsense. Real music doesn't need computers and synthesizers to sound good. It just needs someone who understands how to capture authentic performance." When Prince quietly asked Clapton if he'd like to hear what real production actually sounded like, the guitar legend smugly agreed, expecting to witness another example of the artificial pop music that he believed was destroying rock and roll's authentic spirit. What happened next didn't just shock Eric Clapton. It left Abbey Road's most experienced audio engineers questioning everything they thought they knew about sound, as Prince proceeded to create the most complex, emotionally devastating live mix in recording history, using nothing but his hands, his ears, and an understanding of sonic architecture that operated on levels that even London's greatest studios had never witnessed. If you believe that true mastery reveals itself not through dismissing others' techniques, but through demonstrating abilities that transcend every category critics can construct, please subscribe to witness the moment when one artist's studio tricks became a masterclass in sonic genius that redefined what the world's greatest recording engineers thought was possible. Abbey Road Studios in August 1987 was operating at the height of its legendary status as the world's most prestigious recording facility. The studio that had hosted the Beatles, Pink Floyd, and countless other musical legends was booked months in advance by artists who considered recording there to be the ultimate validation of their professional status. Prince's presence at Abbey Road was part of a strategic decision to record portions of Sign O' the Times in London, utilizing the studio's famous acoustics and world-class equipment to create sounds that couldn't be achieved in his Minneapolis headquarters at Paisley Park. He had been working in Studio 2 for 6 days, collaborating with Abbey Road's senior engineers to capture specific sonic textures for songs that would become some of his most critically acclaimed work. Eric Clapton's appearance at the studio wasn't coincidental. He was scheduled to begin recording sessions for what would become his August album starting the following week. Clapton had arrived early to familiarize himself with Studio 2's setup and discuss technical requirements with the engineering staff who would be supporting his sessions. The relationship between Prince and Clapton in 1987 was complicated by their different approaches to music creation and their contrasting philosophies about technological innovation versus traditional craftsmanship. Clapton, at 42, was a blues purist who had built his reputation on guitar virtuosity and authentic emotional expression, often criticizing what he saw as the over-reliance on electronic equipment in contemporary music. Prince, at 29, represented a new generation of artists who embraced technology as a creative tool while maintaining deep respect for musical tradition. His ability to seamlessly blend electronic innovation with classic songwriting had made him one of the most influential musicians of the 1980s, but had also attracted criticism from traditionalists who viewed his methods as artificial or inauthentic. The confrontation began when Clapton entered Studio 2's control room and observed Prince working with the mixing console in ways that defied conventional recording practices. Prince had covered the mixing board with handwritten notes, frequency charts, and acoustic diagrams that looked more like scientific research than typical studio documentation. More provocatively, Prince was using the studio's equipment in combinations and configurations that Abbey Road's engineers had never seen attempted. He had created custom signal paths that bypassed traditional routing, established feedback loops that generated controlled harmonic distortion, and programmed the studio's digital systems to respond to real-time input in ways that turned the mixing console into a playable instrument. "What exactly are you trying to accomplish here?" Clapton asked Prince, his tone carrying the condescending friendliness that experienced musicians sometimes use when addressing younger artists they consider misguided. Prince looked up from the console, where he had been adjusting parameters that controlled not just volume and tone, but spatial placement, harmonic content, and rhythmic interaction between different instrumental elements. "I'm trying to create music that sounds like what people feel rather than what they hear," Prince replied quietly. Clapton laughed, a sound that carried more dismissal than amusement. "That's very poetic, but music is about performance, not production. The best recordings capture great musicians playing great songs. All this electronic manipulation just gets in the way of authentic expression." Prince continued working while Clapton addressed the room with the authority of someone whose opinions carried significant weight within the music industry. "This is exactly what's wrong with modern music," Clapton announced to the control room, which now included Abbey Road engineers Peter Martinez, Sarah Chen, and David Rodriguez, along with producer Michael Anderson, who had been observing Prince's innovative techniques. "All these fancy studio tricks, electronic gimmicks, and overproduced nonsense. Real music doesn't need computers and synthesizers to sound good. It just needs someone who understands how to capture authentic performance." Clapton gestured toward Prince's elaborate console setup, as if it were evidence of artistic corruption rather than creative innovation. "I've been making records for 20 years, Clapton continued, "and the best ones are always the simplest. Put a good musician in front of a microphone, capture the performance honestly, and let the music speak for itself. All this technological complexity just creates distance between the artist and the audience." Prince listened without immediate response, but something in his expression suggested that Clapton had just triggered a demonstration that the guitar legend wasn't prepared to witness. "Eric," Prince said quietly, his voice carrying the calm confidence that came from years of being underestimated by people who confused complexity with artifice, "would you like to hear what real production actually sounds like?" Clapton nodded smugly, assuming he was about to witness another example of the artificial pop music that he believed was destroying rock and roll's authentic spirit. "By all means," Clapton replied, settling into a chair in the control room. "Show us how all these studio tricks improve on honest musical expression." Prince smiled, not with triumph or arrogance, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who was about to educate rather than humiliate. "I'm going to create a live mix that demonstrates why production is not about hiding music. It's about revealing music that exists in dimensions most people can't hear yet." Prince explained as he began configuring the console for what would become a legendary demonstration of sonic architecture. "Before we reveal how Prince's understanding of sound transcended every category that traditional recording had established, and what happened when Abbey Road's most experienced engineers witnessed production techniques that redefined their understanding of what mixing consoles could accomplish, let me ask you, have you ever seen someone transform criticism into education? Have you witnessed expertise that operated so far beyond conventional understanding that it seemed like magic? Share your thoughts in the comments, because what happened next became a masterclass in why some forms of genius cannot be appreciated until they're demonstrated at levels that force even experts to reconsider everything they thought they knew. Prince positioned himself at the mixing console like a conductor approaching an orchestra, his hands moving across faders, knobs, and digital interfaces with the fluid precision of someone for whom technology had become a natural extension of creative thought. The Abbey Road console, which had been modified with cutting-edge digital components alongside its legendary analog circuitry, became an instrument under Prince's control in ways that its designers had never envisioned. "What you call studio tricks?" Prince said as he began routing signals through pathways that Abbey Road's engineers had never seen configured. "I call sonic architecture. Every sound exists in three-dimensional space, has harmonic relationships with every other sound, and carries emotional information that can be enhanced or destroyed depending on how it's processed." Prince's approach to the console was methodical but intuitive, his fingers finding controls without looking, adjusting parameters that controlled not just volume and tone, but spatial placement, harmonic content, and rhythmic interaction between different instrumental elements. He had spent months studying Abbey Road's technical specifications before arriving, understanding exactly how the studio's unique acoustic properties would interact with his production techniques. Prince activated a playback of "If I Was Your Girlfriend," one of the tracks he had been working on, but instead of playing it through the studio monitors conventionally, he began manipulating it in real time using the mixing console as a performance instrument. His hands moved across the board with choreographed precision, each adjustment calculated to create specific sonic effects that built upon previous modifications. What happened next left everyone in Studio 2 struggling to understand what they were hearing. Prince wasn't just adjusting volume levels or adding effects. He was reconstructing the song's spatial reality in real time, creating the illusion that instruments were moving through three-dimensional space around the listeners, that voices were emerging from specific locations and traveling to different positions within the stereo field. The technique required understanding not just of audio engineering principles but of psychoacoustics, room dynamics, and human hearing psychology. Prince had studied how different frequencies interact with Abbey Road's specific acoustic characteristics, allowing him to create spatial effects that seemed to defy the physical limitations of stereo reproduction. "Watch this," Prince said as he demonstrated his most sophisticated technique. Using a combination of phase manipulation, harmonic enhancement, and controlled delay, he made his vocals appear to emerge from directly behind the listeners, then travel in a smooth arc around the room before settling in a position that felt intimate and immediate, despite coming from speakers positioned 10 feet away. Peter Martinez grabbed a notepad, frantically trying to document the console settings that Prince was using to create effects that shouldn't have been possible according to traditional recording principles. "How are you creating spatial movement without using pan controls?" Martinez asked, his voice filled with professional confusion. "I'm using phase relationships and harmonic content to create the illusion of movement," Prince explained while continuing to work, his hands never pausing in their intricate dance across the console. Every frequency has a natural position in three-dimensional space based on how human ears process directional information. If you understand how different frequencies interact with room acoustics and human hearing psychology, you can make sounds appear to come from anywhere within a 360-degree field. Prince demonstrated by making his vocals seem to emerge from behind the listeners, then move in a circle around the room before settling in a position that felt intimate and immediate, despite coming from speakers positioned 10 feet away. But Prince was just getting started with his demonstration of production techniques that transcended conventional understanding. The real revelation came when he began implementing what he had privately developed over years of late-night experimentation, a systematic approach to sound that treated mixing not as technical adjustment, but as emotional architecture. Using Abbey Road's digital systems in combination with analog processing chains that he configured in real time, Prince began creating what he called, quote, emotional frequency mapping, adjusting not just the tonal characteristics of different instruments, but their harmonic relationships to create psychological effects that enhanced the song's emotional content in ways that bypassed conscious analysis. Every emotion has a frequency signature that resonates with specific neural pathways, Prince explained as he worked, his hands moving across controls that most engineers use separately but which he was combining into complex, interdependent systems. Sadness typically resonates around 256 Hz, because that frequency matches the natural vibration of human tears. Joy peaks around 528 Hz, which corresponds to the heart rate during moments of pure happiness. Anger concentrates in the 660 Hz range, because that's where aggressive vocal tones naturally settle. To demonstrate this principle, Prince isolated a single musical phrase from "If I Was Your Girlfriend" and played it through 3 different harmonic treatments. The first version emphasized frequencies that induced melancholy, making the listeners feel nostalgic and slightly sad despite the unchanged melody and lyrics. The second version enhanced joy frequencies, creating a sense of uplifting hope. The third version triggered subtle anxiety by emphasizing frequencies that humans instinctively associate with danger or uncertainty. David Rodriguez, who had engineered albums for Led Zeppelin and The Who, found himself taking detailed notes as Prince revealed production techniques that operated beyond anything he had learned in 20 years of professional recording. "This is impossible," Rodriguez whispered to Sarah Chen. "He's creating emotional effects that shouldn't work according to everything we know about audio engineering, but I can feel them working on me right now." Sarah Chen, whose background included classical music training as well as rock engineering experience, was equally amazed by Prince's systematic approach to emotional manipulation through pure frequency content. "He's treating sound like a language that speaks directly to the nervous system," she murmured, watching Prince adjust parameters that created psychological effects she could feel but couldn't technically explain. But Prince's most devastating demonstration was yet to come. Using techniques he had developed during late-night experiments at Paisley Park, Prince began creating what he called harmonic storytelling, manipulating the frequency content, spatial placement, and dynamic relationships of different musical elements to create narrative structures that operated below conscious awareness but affected listeners on profound emotional levels. The song he was mixing began to tell a story that transcended its lyrics, creating impressions of childhood memories, lost love, hope, fear, and resolution through pure sonic manipulation. The technique was so subtle that listeners couldn't identify specific changes, but so powerful that everyone in the control room found themselves emotionally affected in ways they couldn't explain. Eric Clapton, who had expected to witness an example of artificial overproduction, sat in stunned silence as Prince demonstrated mastery of sound that operated on levels he had never imagined possible. "Eric," Prince said as he brought the demonstration to its climax, "this is what production really means. It's not about hiding music behind technology. It's about using technology to reveal musical dimensions that acoustic instruments alone cannot access." Prince's final flourish involved creating a live mix that combined elements from the original recording with real-time instrumental performances, vocal harmonies, and electronic textures that he generated simultaneously using keyboard controllers, vocal microphones, and digital interfaces. For 5 minutes, Prince performed a one-man orchestra that demonstrated not just technical mastery, but creative vision that transformed Studio 2 into a three-dimensional musical environment where every sound had specific spatial placement, harmonic purpose, and emotional function. When Prince finally brought the performance to its conclusion, Studio 2 remained silent for nearly 30 seconds as everyone present processed what they had just experienced. Eric Clapton was the first to speak, his voice showing none of the dismissive confidence that had characterized his earlier comments. "Prince," Clapton said slowly, "what you just did, that wasn't production in any sense I understand. That was composition, performance, and sonic sculpture happening simultaneously." Prince nodded, recognizing that Clapton had just understood something fundamental about the difference between using technology as a crutch and using technology as a creative medium. "The equipment is just tools," Prince replied. "What matters is understanding how sound works, how it moves through space, how it affects human consciousness, how it can be shaped to create experiences that pure acoustic music cannot achieve." Peter Martinez, Abbey Road senior engineer, approached Prince with obvious professional humility. "Prince, I've been working in this studio for 15 years. What you just demonstrated with our equipment, we didn't know our own console could do those things. You've been using it in ways that our own technical manuals say shouldn't work." Prince smiled. "Most people use mixing consoles like calculators. They focus on individual numbers rather than understanding the relationships between all the numbers. I approach mixing like architecture. Every element has to support every other element while contributing to a structure that's more complex than any individual component." Sarah Chen, who had engineered sessions for Pink Floyd and had considered herself knowledgeable about innovative recording techniques, found herself asking Prince for clarification about methods that challenged her understanding of audio engineering principles. "How do you create the illusion of instruments moving through space without using traditional panning techniques?" she asked. "Phase relationships and harmonic content," Prince explained patiently. "Every frequency has natural spatial characteristics. If you understand how different frequencies interact with room acoustics and human hearing psychology, you can create movement effects that feel more natural than mechanical panning." The impact of Prince's demonstration extended far beyond that single evening at Abbey Road. Word of his production techniques spread throughout London's recording community, attracting audio engineers, producers, and musicians who wanted to understand methods that transcended conventional recording practices. Eric Clapton's attitude toward Prince and modern production techniques changed dramatically following the Abbey Road session. In interviews conducted years later, Clapton acknowledged that the experience had expanded his understanding of what recorded music could accomplish. "Prince showed me that technology and authenticity aren't opposites," Clapton told Rolling Stone in 1995. The way he used the studio, it was like watching someone paint with sound. He wasn't hiding behind the equipment, he was using it to reveal musical dimensions that I hadn't known existed. More significantly, several prominent producers and engineers began studying Prince's techniques, leading to innovations in recording technology and mixing methodology that influenced popular music throughout the 1990s and beyond. Abbey Road Studios began offering specialized workshops on advanced spatial mixing techniques, based partly on methods that Prince had demonstrated during his 1987 sessions. The studio's technical staff developed new equipment configurations and software applications designed to replicate some of Prince's more innovative approaches to sonic manipulation. When Prince died in 2016, Abbey Road Studios issued a statement that honored both his musical contributions and his influence on recording technology. Prince Rogers Nelson demonstrated that true production genius lies not in using technology to replace human creativity, but in using human creativity to expand what technology can accomplish. His work at Abbey Road challenged our understanding of what recorded music could achieve. Today, the mixing console in Abbey Road Studio 2 features a small plaque commemorating Prince's 1987 demonstration. August 22, 1987. The night production became performance art, and studio tricks became sonic architecture. Audio engineering schools around the world now teach courses on Prince production techniques, analyzing his methods for creating spatial movement, emotional frequency mapping, and harmonic storytelling through pure sonic manipulation. The Sign O' the Times album, which incorporated many of the techniques Prince demonstrated at Abbey Road, is studied by audio engineers as an example of how innovative production can enhance rather than compete with strong songwriting and musical performance. Prince Rogers Nelson proved that true production mastery involves understanding sound as a three-dimensional creative medium rather than a two-dimensional recording process, and that the most powerful studio tricks are those that reveal musical dimensions that acoustic instruments alone cannot access. A musician taught Abbey Road's greatest engineers that their own equipment contained possibilities they had never imagined, and that authentic expression could be enhanced rather than diminished by technological innovation, when guided by creative vision that transcended categorical boundaries. If this story reminds you that true mastery involves expanding possibilities rather than accepting limitations, and that some forms of genius can only be appreciated when they're demonstrated at levels that force experts to reconsider their fundamental assumptions, please subscribe to keep these lessons alive. Because the world needs more examples of how creative vision transforms tools into art, and how authentic innovation always transcends the artificial boundaries between tradition and technology.